All right, John, thank
Out
you for
there.
your help this morning. And today is April 16th, and we just thought we would do maybe 10 minutes, talk to you about a topic that came up for me just the other day. I brought it up really briefly, and it's the definition of grief. And we want to stay with the topic because a lot of times, whether you're grieving over the loss of a parent, loss of a child, loss of a relationship, loss of a job, all the components are more or less still the same. We still go through the 5 steps of death. We go through the 5 steps of divorce. We go through the 5 steps of separation. And what people don't realize is that if you miss one, you're going to go do it anyway. But what I look at really, really carefully is, say I'm putting my hands up. This is someone that's passed away, and this is someone who's grieving that person. How do you look at the grief process involved with that person? I was mentioning to John that this lady from Hawaii lost an only child, and he and she were wanting to step out of their bodies and no longer be alive. And when it came down to the last minutes, and this is what we're going to explore here, is who was she really grieving for? Was she grieving the loss of her son? Absolutely. I'm not going to minimize that. But I kind of was listening between the lines, and what she was missing was her totality of womanhood and her ego associated with being a mother, a parent, and someone to take care of.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can totally see where you're coming from with that, Nancy. Totally. And I think,
Yeah, and that was really,
yeah, I think grief. I think grief affects everybody in different ways, and on different levels. And I think you're quite right. I think if ever you do miss a step in the process of grief out, I think you miss. First of all, you miss part of the process is healing, and I think that's a big part. And if ever you miss one of the key elements of grief, or the feeling of grief, or going through the feeling of grief, it can leave you feeling very empty, and very lonely. And is it, like you say, is it the fact, are we grieving for the person, for the loss of the
yeah.
person, or are we grieving for our own, I know this sounds awful, but for our own selfish needs? Are we grieving because of, we want that person still here? And is the grief that we're experiencing, is it a selfish grief, or is it a grief that can be, sort of explored and forgiven type of thing?
I was talking to a young woman who lost, there's a little bit of feedback here. I was talking to a young woman who had a substantial amount of grief and loss in her life. And the problem I see is you're being very selfish. You're not allowing the person to leave their body and go to the next level of their existence. You're wanting to hold them back to your flesh level. And maybe they don't have to be here anymore. Maybe they learned what they learned. So for this woman, I'm visualizing she had blonde hair. On some level, her purpose was also gone. And this was a love relationship. No, this was a lover that had died. And so she felt cheated in her life of not fulfilling more. And I said, maybe up to this point of that man's passing, oh, I do remember this. They were living together, and he died of an aneurysm. And he died at his computer, and he just fell on the ground. It was just like, bam. And so she came up for work. They'd never gotten married. So the family came over and took all the stuff, everything that was his and theirs together, but had him in it. So she was also experiencing shock and grief at the totality of the separation, because parents evidently didn't want her to have anything of his.
Hmm.
And she didn't get invited to the funeral. So she was really insulted for the commitment they had and the unpredictability of the moment of his passing. That's a little different than someone you've been married to for a long time. That's also different than the child loss. When I went through hospice training, they said it's never that you get over grief, but you redefine it, and you don't have it weeping on your chest anymore. You redefine it and put it in your pocket. And most people don't know how to define that level of grief and how to have it in their life. What I'm going to is trying to get emotionally healthy again. Because between the time of the
Absolutely.
event and the time they get over it, you could pass away. And then you would go to spirit land and never recovered emotionally. And so you become a spirit person
Of
with unfulfilled destiny of your own not
Absolutely.
done.
Absolutely. And it's funny
Oh,
because I was actually talking to. It's really funny we're talking about this because I was talking to a client the other day, who was very, very. Um, I was trying to explain that when we pass over to the world of spirit, that we don't actually lose our consciousness. So our
yeah,
consciousness still carries on,
yeah,
and it's still there. And I was trying to explain that when we sort of come back and when we communicate with spirit, how we appear as we were on earth, and
yeah,
just imagine that if you are in that grief process and you're not healed, and then you do pass away yourself, how
yeah.
terrible that must be for you to be. Because not only have you lived here with all that feeling of grief, but you're taking that onto the next level that is going to sort of be tenfold again. And
Well, that
how difficult that would be for a spirit person, or the consciousness to sort of carry on, having all that grief and not being fully aware of how to understand that grief and to cope with that grief. Because let's face it, it's a shock when somebody passes
yeah,
out anyway. It's a shock to the
mhm,
body, although, and it's a shock to the consciousness. So not only have we got that to deal with and learn to communicate back, but then we to have all that grief as well, to learn to deal with that from a spiritual side, you know, I would
it
imagine
goes
that
both
would be,
ways for sure.
yeah, very difficult.
Absolutely. Another lady that called me with grief for losing a partner, she was wanting to hold on to him and not wanting to pass. He passed over, and she got that. But what she was doing was holding on to his life force and not wanting him to go to a higher level also. So there seems to be another layer. Like when you first pass over, that level of grief you have for that person, if you don't get over your level of grief, the spirit person will not recover either. And I've had a lot of people, spirit, come to me and say, and I'm like, oh, thank you for the compliment. Like they say, I know you can talk to this person because their grief is holding me back from not recovering.
ex-
So the spirit person comes and they cry all over this person. I'm so sorry I died. I'm so sorry I can't talk to you. I'm so sorry that you're still stuck and not going on with your life. Oh, this could be a topic we may have to cover a couple of times because there's
yes,
so many aspects of here. We
definitely.
thought we could 10 minutes, everybody. It's what we wanted. But I guess you get the point is that when we have an incident of grief. And we'll cover loss of a marriage, loss of a partnership, loss of a job later on. But for you that are experiencing firsthand traumatic grief, what I find a lot of times is people like a bad breakup. We don't know how to live our life without that companion nearby. We don't know how to stand alone. We don't know how to play off our own thoughts, not somebody else's. That's also grief. That plays into your selfishness of saying, it was for me, this person was here. It's not a 50-50. So if they died, you should only assume their half of what they're responsible, not the whole 50 to 100, 150% of I'm all alone in the universe, I can't survive. Because you can survive because you're already surviving 50% of your partnership.
That's right, definitely.
That's really hard.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, like you were saying earlier on about, when when grief, I feel that grief can also, because obviously we get loads of people coming through, and loads of people ask me, oh, I really want to get in touch with my mom, and I miss my mom so much. And the
Yeah.
grief that people feel and experience is horrendous, and it's an awful thing, but it is a process we need to go through and learn from. But I often say to people, sometimes it can be that grief that can actually stop the people communicating and stop the communication with spirit, because
Oh, that's true. Mm-hmm.
the grief process, I say to people, the people on the other side wouldn't want to come back and upset you, and wouldn't want to bring all that upset again to you. They want to bring and communicate and bring joy and happiness back into your life. Okay, and you see, and by you grieving, they're not going to come through and upset you because you're still going through the grief that you're experiencing down here. So that can really
True.
sort of, cause not a spiritual wall, but it can, they're not going to come through to upset you even more when they can see how upset you are because of grief,
Absolutely.
because of you not letting go of the grief and not letting go of the emotion and the feeling with the grief and not go through the healing process. That's how I feel
A
it goes.
couple, a couple things there too is that you're coming to talk to us with your profound grief, and you want solace from the dead person. You're also wanting to tell them what you do in the privacy of your home, how much you love them. Just this happened twice this week. It's interesting that the spirit person that they wanted to talk to was out of sight and out of hearing of what was going on because they were also getting upset. So the spirit person hearing your grief and crying at the table or the chair or wherever you're sitting, they don't know how to help you. So we kind
Exactly.
of covered that a few minutes ago, but it's still the same process, is that you're live talking to us. You got to remember you're the live one, and you need to fulfill what you're still here to do.
That's right.
Uh, and I've had people say to me, I want to go home and kill myself. Can you give me a good reason? Because everybody I love is gone. I remember one client said they had 5 people missing within it was a man, I think. He had like 5 people die in the last couple of years. Everybody was family. And he was having the survivor guilt, which is very important to talk about. He was also the feeling of poor me because he was dumped on, having to take care of all this. He was very resentful. So he was holding that against the dead people, the spirit people too. Like, how dare they abandon when I had to take care of somebody else?
Yeah,
It's like all these levels of grief, and every way you look at it, you're still looking at, don't be mad at the person because they are dead and they can't do anything about it. They're grieving like you are, so you have to allow them to grieve. You can't over grieve and take away from the value of your life. That's very important.
very.
Grief can come at any stage, any place, movie, song. Identify it, own it. I'm grieving. I know that. I have loss in my life, but I'm alive and I have to continue. Those are really important steps.
Absolutely. I think, as well, like you say, Nancy, as well, I think a lot of people sometimes have this sort of thing in them that says, I can't grieve because I have to be strong. I have to be
That's
strong
true.
because, society says perhaps that I have to be strong, or society says that I shouldn't grieve and I have to carry on. And like you
Yeah.
say, there can be a trigger. It may be that someone's passed away, and perhaps you don't go through the grieving period for maybe 2 or 3 years later, and then
That's
there'll be a tune or a record or a movie, and all of a
mhm,
sudden it will hit you. But it is
mhm.
really, really important to go through that grieving process, no matter how you sort of try and put it to one side, no matter how you try and um, sort of put it away, or I'm coping with things. You have to go through that process to understand the process, to grow and to further yourself, not only on a physical plane, as in sort of here on Earth, but also for your own benefit when you transcend to spirit as well. Um, because there's
Let
nothing
me cap that.
worse than
Go
than
ahead.
grief.
I'm trying to capture a word that you said, a little sentence. It's really important that we look at this. The word grief means that you've had a situation in your life happen where you had no control. That you can say to this person, you cannot die. You cannot have future with this person. The things that you planned in your life that you thought you had in a box that you could count on has been changed. Those are the things you're missing. The love and attention you would get from this person, the love and attention you would give to this person is the definition of grief. Like, what you thought was perfect is no longer that way. So grieving means you have to let go of those things and turn responsibility of your life totally to just one person, not to share. So you're grieving the loss of sharing, the loss of giving, the loss of receiving. That's the true nature of grief. To grieve to the place where it consumes you is why we're talking about it. In the mid 90s, I had a friend, a woman friend, client, pardon me, a friend of mine's friend come to see me, and she walked in, and she was kind of disheveled. I'm like, she was in the wind, or she was just not put together. And she sat down, and she says, "I'm so mad. I'm just," and I go, "Wow," she's gritting her teeth, and she's angry and everything. And I says, "What's going on?" She says, "I'm so mad at this man. He's left me, and I just can't get over it." And I says, "Well," and she looks 60, at that time, and I thought, she's at an age when a recent breakup would really hinder her life. And I got his name, and I said, well, tell me, how many years or how long has it been since you had this terrible breakup that's just holding you back? And she said, 17 and a half years. I went, whoa, 17 and a half years. Let me think how long that is. That's a long time. I think 5, 10, 15, 2 years. And I said, why do you think it's taking you so long to get over this? And she said, we were such good lovers, and he didn't tell me that he really didn't want to be part of my life. He really wanted just an affair. And I said, then how come you've held on it? She says, I blame me for not seeing that. And it's held me up because I wanted more. She wanted him in her life. She wanted the love, and it happened the other way around. It can be a man being taken advantage
Yeah,
of a
absolutely.
woman or whatever kind of
Absolutely.
situation.
Yeah, yeah.
But the thing is that she felt so betrayed that she never knew how to recover from that. That sentence alone is a sense of grief, not that she left him.
That's right.
He left her. It's the sign that she couldn't get over being
That's right.
betrayed. So that's another form of grief. It's the same as death. He could
That's
have
right.
died on.
That's right. And I mean, I often try and say to people, or I try and help people and say, look, when certainly where sort of relationships are concerned and there's an interaction between two people, if they could only see their own potential and the person's potential, and even if they can't be together, how they can be apart and separate, and
Yep,
they can be, happy and completely, the joy that people can feel that they can't see when you're involved with somebody, and then the grief goes, and then you have a separation and grief sort of sets in, and you're grieving because you're wanting that so much. But really, if you could only try and move your focal point and see
yeah,
what a wonderful life you can have still, and also how that person can have a wonderful life, but maybe not necessarily together,
right.
and it's trying to sort of highlight that to people, and I think once you can understand that yourself, you can get rid of that feeling of grief, because that's more of a selfish grief. That's more of a, you're grieving because it's a self a selfless, not a selfless, a selfish part of you is grieving because this is what this is what you want. And I often say to people, look at your life and look at the things, just because there's a difference between a need and a want.
Hmm.
There's a difference between, and do you actually need this, or are you actually wanting this? And and
Oh, we
if
all want this. We
that
just don't always have it. So
that,
then you have to be, hey, grow up. If you don't have it, so what?
that's it.
Another thing I'll add to that is if you have two people and then they break up, what you've learned from that relationship is not zero. What you learned from the relationship and all you got, and that was all you're supposed to have. And the universe said, okay, you learned what you're supposed to. Now go on your way. And that's awful hard if you've been married. But a lot of people marry their lovers. They don't always marry their life partners. So before that life partner shows up, you have to have relationships so you can grow to be 100%. And you don't become 100% by one relationship or watching TV. You have to experience
Absolutely,
life.
you do, and I do think, yes, absolutely, and you have to experience. The more experience you have, I think, the better you get at it. I
Oh,
think as well. Was us. That was me and Nancy talking about grief. Thank you for listening, guys. It was a pleasure, as always. And as always, if you do want to find out any more about either me or Nancy, don't forget you can visit our websites, which is Nancy, www.
NancyMatz.net.
.net, and mine is www.orbsuk.co.uk. So thanks again, guys, for tuning in, and hopefully we'll see you again shortly.
Talk to you later. Bye.